Welcome to Just a Taste, a place to season your soul. Thank you for joining us at Just a Taste, where today we continue to look at What's Your Name? So greatness in the eyes of God is always preceded by humility before Him. See, there's no way for you or me or anyone else to attain greatness until we have come to Him. God asked Jacob his name not because God didn't know it. He wanted to know if Jacob knew it. He wanted to know if Jacob was ready to come to grips with who he really was, or whether he was simply going to continue to fight and wrestle with God. And so here we are. For the first time, Jacob confesses. The mirror that God is holding up to Jacob's face in Haran has worked. See, here in Haran, Jacob reaped what he had sowed and sowed what he'd reaped. He'd seen himself, and it realizes it isn't a pretty picture. Here we find a different Jacob. Jacob, he's the one who hid behind animal skins to get a blessing from his father, and who even just recently, moments ago, sent a gift to send a gift ahead of him to disguise and to protect himself from his brother. Here's the real Jacob coming out of hiding. This Jacob answers with his name. And if he's going to seek a blessing, he will seek it by being himself and admitting his flaws. So in essence, when Jacob replied to the question of what is your name, he was telling God and coming to a moment of truth that says, yes, I am Jacob. I am the heel grabber. I am the supplanter. I am the deceiver. But in all of that, I want your blessing. And once Jacob was able to come to the end of himself and declare who he was in his own strength and, ultimately weaknesses, then God was able to make all things new after being in his presence. The blessing took the form of a new name, Israel. This name probably means God fights, as the popular etymology signifies. And the explanation was then given that Jacob had fought with God and with men. It's easy to comprehend his having fought with men, but that he fought with God is more difficult to understand. And sometimes I've got to understand it for ourselves, is why do we find ourselves wrestling and fighting with God when He's a Father who gives nothing but good gifts? See, throughout Jacob's entire life, he had been dragging God's blessing out under all circumstances for his own use, under his own steam. He was too self-willed and too proud to let the blessing be given to him. So God fights was now his name, which this meant first that God chose, because of the patriarch's stubbornness and pride, to fight against him. And second, it meant that God would now fight for Israel. See, Jacob's new name would remind him and others of this fight in which he had overcome. These words were full of hope to the Israelites. And if one could contend successfully with God, he could then win the battle with man. Thus the name God fights, and an explanation that Jacob had overcome, obtained the significance of a promise for the nation's forthcoming struggles that even exist still to today. See, when God touched the strongest sinew of that wrestler, Jacob, it shriveled, and with it his persistence, his self-confidence also shriveled. His carnal weapons were lame and useless, and they failed him in this contest against God. What Jacob had surmised for the past 20 years now dawned on him. He was in the hands of the one against whom it is useless to struggle. And after this crippling touch, Jacob's struggle took a new direction. See, now crippled in his natural strength, he became bold in faith. God, the real proprietor of the land, opposed his entering as Jacob. In his self-will and in his own strength, he could never enter the land. And here's the point of the story, that Israel's ultimate victory would come not by the usual ways by which nations gain power, but through the power of the divine blessing. See, self-sufficiency, it's incompatible with the work of God in any age. Faith in God alone overcomes the world. And Jacob, the deceiver, meets God, the Redeemer, and his life is completely and irreversibly changed. And as a symbol of his new life and of his adoption into God's family, Jacob gets a new name. What's your name? Just a Taste is a feature of Panem Ministries.